In a quiet suburb of Romeoville, Illinois, life moved at an easy pace. It was the kind of place where neighbors exchanged friendly waves, children played freely in their front yards, and families gathered for backyard barbecues. Among these residents were Alberto Rolon and Zoraida Bartolome, a hardworking couple raising their two young sons, Adriel and Diego. Alberto and Zoraida were known for their devotion to their family. Alberto worked long hours to provide, while Zoraida juggled the responsibilities of work and raising two energetic boys. Adriel and Diego, full of life and curiosity, were a joy to everyone who met them. They were a family that seemed to have found their rhythm, a strong bond of love and laughter that could be felt in their home. Their house, nestled on a quiet street, reflected their care and effort. It wasn't extravagant, but it was warm, inviting, and alive with the sounds of children's laughter and the playful barks of their three dogs. To those who knew them, they were the picture of a loving and close-knit family. Romeoville itself was the kind of community where safety was assumed. It wasn't unusual for doors to be left unlocked, for parents to let their children roam a little farther from home. It was a town where people looked out for one another, where the idea of danger seemed distant and unreal. But on one September evening, the unthinkable happened. The Rolon Bartolome family's home fell silent. Calls went unanswered, and neighbors noticed something was off. What began as a seemingly ordinary day for the family turned into a tragedy that would leave the entire community shaken. Had you heard of this case before? Share your thoughts in the comments below. It was September 16, 2023, a day that began like any other in the quiet neighborhood of Romeoville. But as the hours passed, something began to feel off. The Rolon Bartolome family, usually active and present, seemed to have vanished. Calls to their home went unanswered. The warm glow of life that usually radiated from their house was absent. By evening, a concerned relative decided to check on them, unable to shake the growing unease. When they arrived at the home, nothing immediately seemed out of place. The house stood as it always had, the same tidy appearance, the same quiet street. But knocking at the door brought no response. After several unanswered calls and growing concern, the relative contacted local authorities to perform a welfare check. When police entered the home, they were met with a scene no one could have anticipated. Inside, they discovered the bodies of Alberto Rolon, Zoraida Bartolome, and their two young sons, Adriel and Diego. The family had been shot to death. Their lives ended in an act of unimaginable violence. Even their three dogs, beloved companions, had not been spared. The discovery sent shockwaves through the police department and the community. In a town where violent crime was almost unheard of, the brutal murder of a family in their own home was beyond comprehension. Investigators quickly secured the scene, determined to piece together the events that had led to this tragedy. The initial walkthrough of the home revealed no signs of forced entry. The doors and windows were intact, suggesting the family might have known their killer or, at the very least, willingly allowed them into the house. The lack of visible struggle indicated the attack had been swift and methodical. Whoever had carried out this horrific act seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Evidence collection began immediately. Every inch of the home was scrutinized for clues, footprints, fingerprints, anything that could point to the perpetrator. Bullet casings were carefully collected, and the positions of the victims provided investigators with a chilling glimpse into the sequence of events. It appeared the family had been ambushed, with little to no chance of escape or defense. Neighbors were questioned, but few could offer any helpful information. Most reported hearing nothing unusual that night. No gunshots, no screams, nothing to suggest the violence that had taken place just a few doors away. It was as though the crime had unfolded in complete silence. As investigators worked through the night, the weight of the case grew heavier. The lack of clear evidence or immediate suspects only deepened the mystery. Who would want to harm a family like the Rolon Bartolomes? What could drive someone to commit such a calculated and heartless act? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, as the scene was processed. News of the murders spread quickly, leaving the community in a state of shock and fear. Parents held their children closer, locking their doors and windows as whispers of the crime filled the neighborhood. For the residents of Romeoville, the sense of safety they had once taken for granted was shattered. As the investigation continued, one thing became clear. This was no random act of violence. The precision of the crime, the lack of forced entry, and the brutal efficiency all pointed to something planned, something deliberate. But the motive remained elusive, and the absence of clear evidence left investigators grasping for answers. If this case intrigues you, give this video a thumbs up. It helps us bring more stories like this. As investigators delved deeper into the horrific murder of the Roland Bartolome family, the initial absence of clear evidence or suspects posed a daunting challenge. But behind the apparent void lay a tangled web of relationships, manipulation, and deception that would gradually come to light. The investigation's turning point came when detectives began piecing together Zoraida Bartolome's personal connections. Their focus soon landed on Nathaniel Huey Jr., a man who had crossed paths with Zoraida through professional circles. On the surface, Huey appeared to be an ordinary man, running a private security company and maintaining an outward image of stability. However, their connection was far from innocent. Huey and Zoraida had been engaged in a secret affair, one that would ultimately prove to be the fuse that ignited an unimaginable crime. The discovery of the affair led investigators to another key figure, Ermalinda Palomo, Huey's fiancée. Palomo, by all accounts, had become aware of the illicit relationship between her partner and Zoraida. But instead of confronting the situation or walking away, she took an unexpected and deeply troubling path. Palomo began weaving an elaborate scheme, leveraging her knowledge of the affair to manipulate Huey into carrying out a deadly plan. Using fake online personas, she created the illusion of a dangerous threat. Through fabricated messages and emails, Palomo convinced Huey that a fictitious Mexican criminal organization was targeting him, his fiancée, and even his business. The false narrative was carefully constructed, painting Zoraida as a key figure tied to the supposed threat. Huey, under the influence of Palomo's deception, was drawn further into her web. The manufactured danger heightened his paranoia, fueling a belief that drastic action was necessary to protect himself and those he cared about. Palomo's manipulation was precise, exploiting Huey's vulnerabilities and fears while masking her true intentions. Together, the pair began meticulously planning what they believed was a solution to their fabricated crisis. Surveillance was conducted on the Roland Bartolome household, with Huey and Palomo tracking the family's routines and habits. Every detail was scrutinized. The times they left for work, when the children were at home, even the layout of the house itself. The plan was chilling in its cold calculation. The couple sought to stage the murders as a burglary gone wrong, a crime of opportunity rather than premeditated violence. The absence of forced entry suggested that they might have gained access to the home by exploiting the family's trust or using information gleaned during their surveillance. As detectives uncovered these details, the full scope of the conspiracy began to emerge. The level of planning and manipulation that had gone into the crime was unlike anything they had seen before. This wasn't a spontaneous act of passion or a random act of violence. It was a crime born from deception and carried out with precision. What drove Huey to act on Palomo's manipulations, to cross the line from fear to murder? The answer lay in the toxic dynamic between the two. Palomo's ability to craft a convincing narrative, coupled with Huey's growing paranoia, created a dangerous synergy. Together, they fed into each other's worst impulses, culminating in the tragic events of September 16, 2023. The investigation revealed more than just the mechanics of the crime. It exposed the fragility of trust, the dangers of manipulation, and the lengths to which people will go when consumed by jealousy, fear, and control. Detectives worked tirelessly to bring these revelations to light, connecting the dots in a case that had initially seemed so devoid of answers. While the community reeled from the loss of the Roland Bartolome family, the uncovering of this dark conspiracy added another layer of shock and disbelief. The notion that a family's life could be destroyed not by some faceless stranger, but by the calculated actions of people they once trusted, was a bitter pill to swallow. This chapter of the investigation painted a grim picture of the human capacity for deceit and violence. Yet it also underscored the determination of those seeking justice. Step by step, the detectives unraveled the twisted plot, ensuring that the truth would not remain hidden. If this case intrigues you, give this video a thumbs up. It helps us bring more stories like this. When news of the murders broke, it sent an immediate and profound shockwave through the community of Romeoville. For a town so accustomed to safety and tranquility, the idea that a family could be brutally killed in their own home was beyond comprehension. Neighbors, who had only days before exchanged friendly waves with the Roland Bartolome family, were now grappling with the horrifying realization that such violence could occur so close to home. Candlelight vigils were quickly organized. People gathered in silence, holding flickering candles as they tried to make sense of the tragedy. Messages of support and grief poured in from across the town and beyond. Flowers and handwritten notes began to pile up outside the family's home, a haunting juxtaposition against the crime scene tape that still fluttered in the wind. The media wasted no time in seizing on the case, with headlines dominating both local and national news outlets. Reporters stood on quiet Romeoville streets, delivering updates as viewers at home tried to piece together the fragments of information being released. The story was covered extensively, not only for the brutality of the crime, but for the mystery that surrounded it in those early days. Who could have done such a thing? And why? As more details emerged, the public's shock turned into speculation. In the absence of concrete answers, people began forming their own theories. Social media lit up with discussions, some expressing sympathy and outrage, while others delved into conjecture. Many pointed to the relationship between Nathaniel Huey Jr. and Zoraida Bartolome as a likely motive, suggesting that jealousy had played a central role. The revelation of Ermalinda Palomo's involvement only added fuel to the fire. The idea that she had created a fictitious criminal organization to manipulate Huey was both baffling and terrifying. How could someone weave such an intricate lie? And what kind of influence must she have held over Huey to convince him to carry out such a heinous act? Others speculated that Huey himself was the mastermind, that he had orchestrated the murders and used Palomo's fabricated threats as a cover. Still, some questioned whether there were additional layers to the story, details yet to be uncovered, or motives hidden beneath the surface. The media coverage amplified these theories, often highlighting the most sensational aspects of the case. Commentators debated the psychological dynamics between Huey and Palomo, with some describing their relationship as a toxic storm of manipulation and control. Experts were brought in to discuss the broader implications of such a crime, how trust can be exploited, how jealousy can fester, and how manipulation can lead to unthinkable consequences. For the community, these theories were both a source of curiosity and discomfort. Many struggled to reconcile the image of the Roland Bartolome family, loving, peaceful, and well-liked, with the violent and calculated nature of their deaths. The contrast was stark, and it left an indelible mark on everyone who followed the case. Parents in Romeoville began questioning their own sense of safety. Strangers were viewed with suspicion, and doors that had once been left unlocked were now double-checked each night. The murders weren't just an isolated tragedy. They had shattered the collective sense of security that the community had taken for granted. As the theories and discussions continued, one sentiment remained constant, a deep and abiding grief for the family whose lives were so brutally cut short. Alberto, Zoraida, Adriel, and Diego were more than just victims in a headline. They were a family who had been robbed of their future. The case left many grappling with the darker sides of human nature, questioning how jealousy, manipulation, and desperation could lead to such an unthinkable crime. And as the story unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just a tale of violence. It was a story about the fragility of trust, the power of lies, and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. The story of the Roland Bartolome family is one that leaves us with more questions than answers. It's a tragedy that defies easy explanation, a portrait of lives that were stolen in an act of calculated violence and desperation. Their story is not just about the horrifying crime that took place, but about the complex and tangled web of emotions, relationships, and choices that led to such an unthinkable outcome. This case reminds us of how deception, jealousy, and manipulation can spiral into acts of destruction that ripple far beyond the lives immediately involved. 4 innocent people, a loving couple, and their 2 young children were taken from this world in an act of senseless brutality. The circumstances of their deaths speak to the darkest corners of human behavior, the places where trust is betrayed and love is weaponized. As the case comes to a close, the unresolved questions linger like an unfinished story. Was it pure manipulation that drove Nathaniel Huey Jr. to commit such an act, or was there something deeper at play? Could this have been stopped if someone had uncovered the lies before it was too late? And how much of this tragedy was rooted in fear, control, or misplaced loyalty? We may never fully understand. The Roland Bartolome family deserves to be remembered for the lives they lived, not just for how they died. Alberto and Zoraida were known as hardworking, devoted parents who prioritized their children above all else. Adriel and Diego were bright, full of potential, their futures extinguished before they even had a chance to fully unfold. This family did nothing to warrant the horror that befell them, and their memory is a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. In reflecting on this case, we are left to confront uncomfortable truths about the human condition. How quickly trust can be turned into betrayal, and how thin the line can be between love and hate when fear and jealousy take hold. The tragedy serves as a call to vigilance, to question the stories we are told and the motives of those who seek to control or manipulate us. As the community in Romeoville tries to heal, the story of the Roland Bartolome family remains a cautionary tale. It is a testament to the importance of recognizing the signs of manipulation and to the devastating effects of unchecked emotions. For those of us hearing their story, it's a chance to honor their memory by seeking truth and compassion in our own lives. The end of this case does not bring closure, only a solemn reminder of what was lost. The Roland Bartolome family, their lives cut short in such a violent and senseless manner, leave behind a void that can never be filled. They are a reminder of the fragility of trust and the terrible consequences that can arise when it is betrayed. What is your take on this case? Does it leave you with as many questions as it does answers? The discussion surrounding this tragedy is one that will likely continue for years to come, as we all try to make sense of something so profoundly unsettling. Thank you for taking the time to hear their story. If this deep dive into the complexities of true crime resonated with you, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to ensure more stories like this are told. Each life lost deserves to be remembered, and each story deserves to be understood. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and stay safe.